Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. I initially wanted to open this review with something like, the 85 1.4 G Master Mark II is finally what we wished for the original 85 GM to be. But that felt way too unfair for the original 85 GM. I mean, yes, for a few years now, just about every Sony shooter I've spoken to agreed that this was long overdue for an update. But more than 8 years ago, this was one of the 3 original G Master lenses which were unveiled for the very first time. The other 2 G Master zooms already got their Mark II successors, so this most certainly is the most anticipated G Master Mark II refresh. Visually, it's quite a new look. It certainly looks like it's lost some weight. Model badge is in a different spot now. Iris ring's been flipped with markings facing the other way. We also have an additional iris lock along with an extra focus hold button on the very top. Despite taking the same 77mm filters as the Mark I, the outer diameter of the Mark II is actually a few millimeters smaller. It definitely feels a lot less bulky than the Mark I, especially the way it gradually gets bigger from the lens mount, whereas on the Mark I it just goes from small to big quite suddenly. The Mark II is about 20% lighter though, so a little more than 640 grams is all it costs to bring around an 85 1.4 G Master Mark II. The 85 is an incredible tool for capturing stunning portraits, but for creating stunning websites, an equivalent of this incredible tool would be Squarespace Blueprint. Squarespace Blueprint is an incredibly powerful guided design tool to help you come up with a catchy website design using the help of AI. Unlike choosing from a template, this gives you a completely personalized design, from color schemes to fonts, and it even lets you tailor the tone of the copywriting that's generated. Your website is automatically optimized for every device. It's also got powerful SEO tools built in to help your site show up more often to more people and in exactly the way you want. Of course, you may want to further customize your sites down the line, and with Squarespace's next-gen website editor called Fluid Engine, you can intuitively customize every little design detail with drag-and-drop technology for both desktop and mobile. With your Squarespace website, you can sell anything from products to content to time. Payments are flexible and seamless for your customers, letting you accept credit cards, PayPal, and Apple Pay, or even offer the option to pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay in eligible countries. Head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/zycheng to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. If you take this 85 G Master Mark II at face value, it may give you the false sense of it being an underwhelming update. It's not doing anything particularly unexpected of an 85 f1.4 lens. In fact, I was actually secretly hoping it would be a much more close focusing 85, but spoiler alert, the minimum focusing distance is unchanged on the Mark II. Though in terms of performance and image quality, the leap from the original 85 GM certainly feels like an 8-year gap. To start with, autofocus speed is in a completely different league going from the Mark I to the Mark II. The Mark I was driven by direct drive SSM technology, and back when it came out, that was about 2 years before we even started hearing about XD linear motors. This 85 GM2 is driven by 2 of these XD linear motors, and Sony does say that it is capably fast to keep up with the 120 FPS continuous shooting speeds with autofocus tracking on the A9 Mark III. That camera is unfortunately still on my wish list, so that's something I have to see for myself sometime in the future. Though what I am able to try out right now is the linear response manual focus on the Mark II. It makes manual focus rack so much easier, especially if you've tried it on the non-linear Mark I. And again, just to be fair to the Mark I, of the 3 initial G Master lenses, which came out back in 2016, the 85 and 2470 were the 2 models which were manual focus by wire, and neither of them had linear response manual focus. On the 85 G Master Mark II, there is also a very visible improvement in resolution. Wide open at f1.4, which is what I imagine this lens will be shot at quite often, fine details are straight up revealed by the version 2 optics. This comparison was made on the 33 megapixel Alpha 7 Mark IV, and I imagine if you happen to be shooting on the 61 megapixel 7R Mark V, for example, the difference would be even more pronounced. The optics are seriously impressive because look at the chromatic aberration exhibited by the Mark II. Exactly. What's chromatic aberration? I had to make sure it wasn't the profile correction doing all the work in camera, but sure enough, we're looking at uncorrected results. Also, the way it transitions from the in-focus areas to the out-of-focus areas, so much more graceful on the Mark II. On any 85 prime, bokeh is going to be an attribute of great concern. Sony seems to be very much aware of that because they do seem to have put in a great deal of work to refine the bokeh on this Mark II. The fringing around the edges of the bokeh balls are much less visible, and not that onion ring bokeh was ever bad on the original, but they do seem to have suppressed it pretty much perfectly on the Mark II. It's also gone from a 9-bladed aperture on the Mark I to 11-bladed on the Mark II, so even more circular stop-downs now. What I did find to be a bit of an interesting surprise on the Mark II is the slightly swirly bokeh you now get. There's definitely more of that swirliness in the Mark II, and this can be a subjective area, but I personally quite like swirly bokeh patterns, so just putting this out there for the Mark II. For Malaysia, the 85G Master F1.4 Mark II will be launching at a retail price of 8,999 ringgit, which puts it more or less in a similar price range as the 51.2G Master. I do get the feeling that this is a purchase which many have been looking forward to making for a while, because at long last, the 85G Master we've all been asking for is finally here.